All right, so let's talk about China. So, in the time period we're in, the Qing dynasty has ruled China for centuries at this point, and China is super self sufficient. They don't need anybody, they don't need trade. They have everything. They've got silk, tea, porcelain. They don't need silver and gold, but other people need silk, tea, and porcelain, so they will trade to China in silver and gold. And so, China is going to have a massive surplus of silver and gold, which is going to lead to a deficit for the rest of the world. But what can you do, right? Well, Britain decides that what you can do is get an entire country addicted to opium. And by introducing opium to the Chinese, they open a massive drug ring. Britain knows that opium is addictive, and they actually get it from their other colony in India. So it's all very imperialistic. But opium is outlawed in Great Britain. You cannot use it, buy it, sell it in Great Britain. And so they knowingly introduce it in China, knowing how addictive it is. And the introduction of opium in China is going to lead to massive drug trade in China, and the Chinese people are going to start to buy opium using the silver, which is going to disrupt the Chinese economy, which is going to take all that surplus they had and end up eventually leaving it to a deficit. And the Chinese government does try to intervene. They go to Great Britain, they ask Britain to stop trading opium and outlaw the use and sale of the drug in China. But Britain refuses to agree to this, saying that they have the rights of free trade in China and they can do what they want. And this leads us to the Opium Wars, where Chinese and British warships are going to meet and get into a fight. And unfortunately, the Chinese have outdated weaponry. And compared to the newer British industrialized ships, the Chinese ships are not going to be able to hold up. And again, if you're like, why didn't they update? Well, they didn't really have to worry about that. They had it, they got the Great Wall of China. They're pretty solid over there. They didn't really have to worry about any of this until opium comes into play. And so Britain is able to defeat China and force them into all sorts of unequal treaties, and the rest of the world powers will follow, and everybody is subjected to the Treaty of Nanjing, which is going to make China very upset, but the rest of the world sees this as a benefit. And by the 1890s, Japan, Russia, Great Britain, France, and Germany all have spheres of influence within China, and the US is very concerned about this because we do not, right? And we are about 10 years away from that gentleman's agreement and the Root Takahira agreement. So we need a foothold in China. We are very concerned that we are going to lose valuable trade markets. So McKinley sends his Secretary of State, John Hayes, to draft a message to the other superpowers that are controlling these spheres of influence in China. And John Hayes drafts this note, and in it, he gives up the idea of the open door policy, which says all nations are going to have equal trade privileges in China. Now, here's this very important thing about this. None of the nations officially agree to Hayes's note. Nobody signs off on it. But no one officially rejects the note either. And because there's no official rejection, Hayes decides that this means that it has been accepted. And so he declares that the open door policy is accepted and it's the new way, and it is a diplomatic triumph for the United States and for John Hayes. And so that's how we get the open door policy. And then in the 1900s, the Chinese are trying to get rid of the foreign influence in their country, and nationalism is on the rise in China. And again, we don't have a lot of time to go deep into China, but it is important to note that by the 1900s, there are neighborhoods in China where Chinese people are not allowed to live because the British live there, and they say that that neighborhood is for them and not the Chinese. So imagine living in your own country and somebody from a different country moves in and says, you can't live here. This is our neighborhood now. So Chinese nationalism is on the rise, and a group of the people called the Society of Righteous and Harmonious Fists are fed up with the foreigners in their homelands. Now, you may know these people as boxers. They are given the nickname boxers by the same British people who see them practicing their mixed martial arts in the hillside and think it looks like boxing. But their official name is the Society of Righteous and Harmonious Fists. They are going to lead a rebellion. They're going to attack to drive out the British. And the US troops join an international force that is going to march to Peking, which is now Beijing, and crush the Boxer Rebellion. And at the end of this, China is forced to pay a huge sum of money for the damages of the rebellion, which is going to lead to an even weaker imperial regime because they don't have a lot of money because they've been spending it all on opium. But John Hayes, our friend from the open door policy, is concerned. He's concerned about Chinese independence. Not for the Chinese. He's concerned that if China loses their independence, then it will be harder to maintain trade with China. So we need to make sure that China stays an independent country. And so he's going to write a second note to the imperial powers. And in this second note, the United States commits to preserving China's territorial integrity. And we, the wonderful US, is going to safeguard equal and impartial trade with all parts of the Chinese emperor. We're stepping in, we're going to protect them. And this note is going to set really the rest of our foreign policy for the next presidents and for our relations with Japan. But it doesn't prevent other European powers from exploiting the situation in China. It just prevents anybody from taking control of China, which is what we want. We don't want China to be controlled by Great Britain. We want to be able to trade. And finally, we have the Roosevelt Corollary to the Monroe Doctrine, which is from 1904. Now, again, this whole thing is big stick diplomacy, right? Roosevelt doesn't think it's necessary to use force. It's just that you have to threaten force to show your power. And what else could we do to do that except maybe go down to the Canal Zone where we see an opportunity? So the Panama Canal is being built at the beginning of the 19th century, 20th century. And the Monroe Doctrine, back from James Monroe, had said that we were going to tell European powers they could not expand their power in Latin America, right? They had to stay where they were. But now that the colonization of the Western Hemisphere is complete, we've decided that interference in Central and South America is not going to be tolerated at all. It's not even if the colonies that they have. So if they come back, then we're going to have problems. And if any problems arise in these territories, then the U.S. is going to intervene to maintain order, peace, and stability. As based on the Monroe Doctrine, we're just extending it now because now the Western Hemisphere is colonized, and most of that is colonized either by us or by somebody that we don't want to expand their territory. And so we are going to use our military as an international police power. And our job will be to correct any wrongdoing by any Latin American nation that might threaten stability. So if Mexico wants to invade, watch out. And we also declare under the Roosevelt Corollary that it is the right and obligation of the United States to involve itself whenever necessary. We have put it on ourselves to become the protectors of the world. And we are going to use this Roosevelt Corollary to establish protectorates over Cuba. Yep, the same Cuba that was supposed to be independent, and Panama. We're going to involve ourselves in the Dominican Republic and Haiti, as well as Nicaragua, Colombia. It's a whole thing. We'll get there. And a lot of people, rightfully so, are upset, but they are fearful of the American response if they resist, because the colonized don't really have the ability to fight them off. And there is one quote from the Roosevelt Corollary. It is not true that the United States feels any land hunger or entertains any projects as regards the nations of the Western Hemisphere, save as such are for their welfare. All that this country desires is to see the neighboring countries stable, orderly, and prosperous. Any country whose people conduct themselves well can count upon our hearty friendship. Chronic wrongdoing or an impotence which results in a general loosening of the ties of civilized society may in America, as elsewhere, require intervention by some civilized nation. And in the Western Hemisphere, the adherence of the United States to the Monroe Doctrine may force the United States, however reluctantly, in flagrant cases of such wrongdoing or impotence, to the exercise of an international police power. We are carrying that big stick, and we are carrying it good.